Hey everybody, welcome back to another deck tech on Arsenal Pass. Today we have the Katsu Aggro deck. So we recently had a gameplay go up with Katsu Aggro versus Chain on the channel. So this is going to be that list that you see in front of you right now. So just delving straight in, Hayden. This list is, the meta is interesting right now. We have a lot of aggro. I think that we've switched more to aggro Katsu, but we still have a lot of control Katsu kind of running around. That is very much in the Monarch meta. The origin of Katsu, I think, has been mostly control based. So why have you kind of diverted from that? And what do you feel is the advantage of playing this sort of list versus playing what I guess we could call the more traditional Katsu list in the form of a control based deck?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about Aggro Katsu versus Control Katsu on the pod for the past few weeks. We've talked about it probably, in our gameplays and like time in the round as well, and a lot of our videos and pods on YouTube. And one of the things that we've kind of consistently said, right, is that the aggressive Katsu decks have been pretty well positioned. You can go and check out that gameplay versus Chain. I think it's a really interesting game about how that kind of dynamic plays out, with, the most dominant deck in the format in terms of most represented. The reason as well, I think, is that the Katsu Aggro deck has a really core key game plan that you can execute on. And we're going to talk through the kind of the pieces of the deck soon, but basically its fundamental is just like 60, really tight cards that allow you to execute a really key aggressive plan and put a lot of pressure on your opponent through going wide with on-hit effects, which a lot of decks in this format can't actually deal with that, especially if you are doing it in a way that's very it's very consistent. Like, it's very tight. You're not expending slots for cards that don't basically contribute to your number one game plan, which is this super aggressive on hit focused go wide deck. So yeah, I think that's why aggressive Katsu decks are pretty well positioned, especially sort of as we head into the back half of the Road to Nationals. We've got 1 week left now. Could be a great choice coming into the last weekend, especially if you want to pick something up that can do pretty well against Chain.
Yeah, absolutely. So I see that you have your core 60 sitting there in front of us, which is not really standard, at least for how we like to build decks. Usually we will have kind of a smaller core inside in accordingly. Can you talk to me about why you've decided to go with a 60 as your core and what the ratios look like?
Yeah, good point. Because usually when we're setting up decks, we're looking at a core that's probably somewhere between like 40, 42 to 55 cards. So having a straight 60 is very odd, but there's a really important reason why this deck is just a straight 60 core. And that's basically because the function of the deck doesn't change no matter what matchup you're in. It's very much the same. And all you're actually doing when you go into matchups and doing a little bit of sideboarding is you're taking a few pieces and you're replacing them with some slightly different pieces into the deck that allow the deck to still operate in the same way. So in every matchup, there's a few different cards that probably change depending on what the matchup is, and it's very small numbers as well. Like, it could be one snatch because you want to draw cards that say go again on them. It might be Scar for a Scar in certain matchups because you're going to be way more of the aggressor and your opponent might not be trying to race you as much. So there's all these sort of reasons that cards might get cut. It could be some of our package of non-attacks here because we want to keep our non-attack ratio the same. You even have a couple of blues in the sideboard, which we'll get to after the course. So that's the reason. But there's, within the deck as well, there's like a sort of a few really, I guess, like section pieces, which we have as like our red non-attack, non-ninja attacks. So these are just like our value cards. So Snatch and Lion Strike. Scarf for Scar because he gets Go Again. Torrent of Tempo, 1 for 5 with the threat of Go Again. And Head Jab as well as a combo start, but we don't actually play the combo line in this deck. All this is really allowing us to do is go wide and threat and mask triggers. It's really good with Art of War. It's really good with cards like Plunder Run as well with the Ancestral Empowerment. Just ways to threaten our mask, our on-hit effects, and that's the whole purpose of the deck. Mask is one of the most important things in this deck. And the whole kind of core, almost in every single matchup, is to try and threaten that as much as possible. So you've got that section there. Then we've got our combo starters where we play 3 red leg tap. We've got 6 Surging Strikes in the deck. And that's actually one of the most important things is Surging Strike. You'll notice we play 6 Surging Strikes, 3 Whelming Gust Wave. We want to, as often as possible, present the Mugenshi line, especially into the mid game. It's often how we're actually winning this game. Not always getting off, but presenting it and making our opponents have to block in a really sort of unfavorable fashion, putting them in difficult situations. And that's what, the 6 Surging, it's just consistency. You just can always guarantee that 2 times a game, you're going to draw the start of the combo. I like starting with it on the chain in this deck. It just doesn't allow your opponent to know what you might have, whether you have that Whelming, whether you have that Mugenshi. And if you ever naturally have one of them, or you might have Arsenal one piece, you just really set up to present the combo to them. And because we play in a format that's really light on defense reactions in general, a lot of really aggressive decks, the best way to punish other aggressive decks is with on-hit effects, aggressive on-hit effects. So that's basically, what this deck wants to do. If we talk about, I guess, the next set of cards here, Brennan, we've got the actual combo cards that come after our starters. So we've got the 3 Whelmings, as we talked about, of course, the 3 McGinchys that go with that. Then we have 3 Red Rising Knee Thrust, just good damage, right? On the end of a leg tap, that's 5 damage, just perfect damage, that's what we want. And then we've got 1 Red Philosopher's, which is actually just a 0 cost for 4. That's a combo card that we can just go and find with Katsu. So sometimes we might have these awkward hands. We've got like 2 blues we don't want. If we get a hit trigger with Katsu, we just go and find Philosopher's if we don't have any other actual combo starters to go with it, because it's just pure damage. And then we've got Blackout Kick and Hurricane Technique, which go on that Rising Knee Thrust chain.
Awesome. And we'll get deeper into these cards here, but you did mention that the deck was well positioned right now. Can you go into more detail there? Why is it well positioned? What has based on where we started in the meta in Monarch and kind of where we evolved to? Do you think it's better positioned now than before? And just give me your full thoughts on kind of what your matchups generally look like and why it's in a good position right now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can do that, and then we can talk about some of these non-attack actions as well. I think we've kind of said right. And thanks for pulling me back, Brendan, about the matchups. But we've kind of talked about it, right? That we felt that Katsu Aggro was probably like a really, really solid choice around like week 3 of Road to Nationals. I still think it's a good choice now, mainly because you have this ability in terms of your matchups to, again, just have that one. You just got one plan and you just execute really well. And I think we're at a point in the meta where we started with, like a lot of decks trying to do 2 things, which is like maybe in some matchups they want to fatigue, maybe in some matchups they want to put on pressure. And then what I think we're finding is that decks that could just do the extreme and do it really, really well, especially if it was aggressive decks, were pretty well positioned. You could really punish decks that might have been cutting a few of their like fates or sinks for cards that help them maybe fatigue, maybe life gain, maybe they're putting sigils back into their deck, things like that. And this plan really punishes that. So I think that's why it's been pretty well positioned, and especially if you look from like a Katsu perspective. I think Katsu Control is kind of in like its worst position right now in terms of where it is. Dash has come back into the format. Chains, the most played deck in the format. You've got Prism even running around, which can be a difficult matchup. So yeah, I think that's why especially if you're a Katsu player, like Katsu Aggro, I think is definitely the way to go. And I would just avoid even like sitting on mid-range decks right now. I would just try and go as aggressive as possible. Present the question, like so you're asking the question, you're having a really proactive game plan, and I think that is actually one of the better ways to beat Chain as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you're eager, but let's go ahead and dive into these non-attack actions.
Yeah, let's do it. So we play 12 non-attack actions in the core. Actually, we play 13. We have this blue plunder run, which might look a bit weird. I'll explain that in a minute as well, because it is a bit of an oddity. But we play these 12, and the 12 are actually really important. The deck cannot sustain more than this. It's actually really important that you don't go above this. If I talk about, one of the things I like to talk about with deck building is like cards that you could probably chop and change it depending on how maybe you like to play the deck. Maybe there's cards you want to get in here. Some cards like Scar, for instance, or even Snatch. They could be possibilities that maybe you remove for other things. I wouldn't recommend it because I think 0 cost threats, generic threats, are really important in this deck with on-hit effects or go again. That's kind of what you want the whole deck to be. But with the non-attack actions, these 12 are really key. So we have the red plunder runs. These just allow us for more damage on our chain, another on-hit effect, so more things for our opponent to try and stop. Razor Reflex does, kind of a similar job. It's just a way to push through mask triggers. It's a way to get go again on things like Snatch or maybe a turned off Scar for a Scar, push through Katsu triggers, push through a Whelming Gust Wave. Just all these things that make it so difficult for our opponent to block and present more on-hit effects. Art of War does a really similar job. Art of War is not, it's not at its best in this deck. It's not like it is in Chain or Levia, but it does do a pretty good job. And when you have 5-card hands, this is where Art of War shines. You really need a 5-card hand in this deck with Art of War. But, if you've got 2 blues in your hand, perfect thing, pitch a blue, get rid of that other blue, cycle it through with the Art of War, give +1 to your attacks, come up with 3 attacks on the chain. That's, +3, plus you're hitting breakpoints, which are really hard to stop. So Art of War actually does a really good job here. And then Ancestral Empowerment. One of the most important things is a non-attack action that blocks for 3, which is quite important in some matchups as well. But 0 cost gives that another breakpoint to that key ninja card, like a Whelming Gust Wave or even a Surging Strike on the start of a chain. And it just cycles through to draw us a card, which is pretty important cost 0, which is really good for Katsu as well.
Yeah, and just to clarify, they're not technically 12 non-attack actions. It's 12 cards that are
Sure.
not
Yeah,
attack
yeah.
actions, right? Yeah,
Not attack
just
actions, yeah.
not attack actions. So yeah, funny little nomer there. So yeah, obviously we've got the blues, which are interesting, but I think one of the most critical questions with this deck is when to play Hardened Cross-Strap and when to play Tunic.
Yeah, good question. I actually just one thing I did miss was with the blue plunder run. So the reason for the blue plunder run is you have quite crucially, you have 12 resource cards here, and they're all combo attack actions. So you've got the one with Gust Wave, which obviously works with our McGinty line, and Lord of Wind, which is really important, being the end of that line. Then you've also got Crane Dance and Find Center, and this actually is a card that you potentially will actually activate in some matchups. Chain actually, you might actually activate this, set the Find Center, or come in with a Crane Dance with Snapdragon Scalers. So it is actually something that you do, I'd say probably like once every 10 games, maybe once every 20 games against Chain. So it's not a plan that you play to, but it can actually come up, and there's other matchups where it can be quite important. The Mirror, it's actually, funnily enough, like a really good sort of line with your Snapdragons, the Mirror. And then Plunder Run, because we actually want 13, just for pure ratio numbers in our deck. 13 blue is about where I want to be. We play the Plunder Run, which actually just is a fourth Plunder Run. So it's a fourth sort of version of Plunder Run that can go into Arsenal quite easily, presents an on-hit effect, and gives us a little bit of a buff. Because most of our blues are pretty bad to Arsenal. Lord of Wind, you don't be Arsenaling. Rain Dance and Find Center, you don't really want to be Arsenaling unless you're on the plan, and probably through like pitch cycle what's coming. Yeah, just wanted to get through that. So Plunder Run looks a bit weird, but it's in the deck for a very important reason, which is that 13th blue in the main deck, plus the 4th Plunder Run. In terms of Hardened Cross-Strap versus Tunic, it basically comes down to how many turns you think the game's going to go. This is a very aggressive deck, so in general, this deck wants the game to last as little amount of time as possible, few turns as possible. So Cross-Strap does a really good job on this deck. Often you're playing into something like Chain or even the Mirror, where you might be 4 or 5 turns. So Hardened Cross-Strap is actually a lot more valuable than Tunic in that matchup, where you might only get 1 counter on the Tunic. It's not always, to be honest, it's not always amazing, and Hardened Cross-Strap it does have like a bit of a downside. The 2 resources is really powerful, but if you don't see the Surging Strike, because that's basically the reason you're playing, right, is the Surging Strike in the main deck. Another reason why we actually play 6 is it does take advantage of the Hardened Cross-Strap. So yeah, in aggressive matchups like Chain, you're definitely playing Hardened Cross-Strap. Tunic, you're playing that where you're expecting the game to go longer than 6 turns. So against control decks where you're trying to set up big turns for in-game, or you're actually trying to grind out some good 5-card turns, that's where you're playing Tunic. Yeah, kind of pretty intuitive about how long you think the game's going to go, to be honest, about which one you play.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So let's delve into the sideboard. But while you go ahead and grab those cards, I do want to mention that if you're interested in a detailed write up on the side with a sideboard guide, and then more information on deck theory, ratios, pretty much breaking down everything that we can, that will be on our Patreon. So if you do want to kind of get the full breakdown of the deck and maybe take this to Vegas or your final road to Nats if it's up before that final week, go ahead and check it out. And we have other deck techs on there, exclusive podcasts, all kinds of stuff. So thanks so much to the people that have already been supporting. And Hayden, back into the deck.
Yeah, so what I've actually got here is I've got the current sideboard, plus I've got some options that I actually just want to talk through that I think some people might...
Is that a prayer? Oh my goodness, sorry, I have to interrupt.
Yeah, so there's like really specific reasons that you play these sideboard slots, and you're actually not bringing more than, I think the most you bring in is 6 in one matchup, maybe 7 into Guardian. So most of these cards you're only bringing like 2. Sometimes you're not bringing any cards, you're just playing that straight 60. So just talk about some of these. So we talked before about that ratio of the not attack actions, not non-attack actions, not attack actions, and Flick Flack actually falls into that spot. So it's really hard to say, like, if you're playing this kind of ninja deck and you feel like, I want some defense reactions for some matchups, the temptation is to be like, okay, well, I'll just like chuck yellow and red Flick Flack, or I'll chuck red Flick Flack and sink below into my deck. But what you're actually going to do is you're going to actively make the core of your deck a lot worse when you're trying to be this really aggressive on-hit focused deck. You're gonna draw into a hand with like whelming and maybe surging, and then you've got like a defense reaction, and now you kind of feel like you need to block with that, but you really wanted a 5-card hand to come in with, and it's just hurting your game plan, which your active game plan is to be aggressive, be on the front foot. So the reason we bring a Flick Flack in basically is to allow us to like set up some pivot turns. It's just such an important card in like the Mirror. and into decks like Bolton that you do want access to the red Flick. It's so powerful in those matchups. So what we actually do is we bring the red Flick in, and we actually have access to 2 Rising Knee Thrust here. So you bring in a Knee Thrust for that 13th blue, the Plunder Run, and you just up your combo count slightly. So yeah, Flickflacks do a good job here. Command and Conquer, primary role is for Prism, but actually into the mirror as well, and into decks that actively want to put 5 cards. And Command and Conquer is just such a powerful card in the current format. It feels weird to play Command and Conquer into a deck like this, but the disruption ability of Command and Conquer when you're playing an aggressive plan right now just feels very powerful. So yeah, a good card there. Remembrance. Basically, you're only playing this into decks that are going to be super defensive. These are still running around in this meta. You're still seeing super defensive control decks like Dash, like Katsu control. So the ability to just have 1 Remembrance, you cycle through your deck, you set up these power cards in game, and then you just go back and get 3 combo pieces. You probably try and keep a Razor Reflex in your deck. You pitch that through the game, and then you just have this like inevitability set up once you've burnt through all the defense reactions. So yeah, Remembrance plays a pretty key role in those matchups. You just need the 1. You just get back through to it. In terms of the last sort of slot here, the Unmovable, and the reason that we also have 2 blues in here, I don't actually love playing Unmovable in this sort of deck, and I think it's a bit of I think this is kind of the most up for grab slot in this sideboard right now. And it's basically, if you're expecting, I would say, Dorinthia, this is where you want to play it. I actually think we're going to see a bit of Dorinthia sort of rise. It's been about this sort of like 5th, 6th deck in this format. If you look at performance-wise, it's about 4th or 5th in this Road to Nationals season. So I do think it is worth having these 3 slots. You can also bring 2 to 3 in against Guardian, depending on which plan they're on, whether they're more defensive. You want them if, like more set up with like big attacks, then you want them if they're on like a Zealous plan, then you probably want Flickflacks, to be honest. And then yeah, you do have these 2 blues to support that, and generally you're bringing in maybe 4 or 5 defense reactions, so you can actually sub out that Plunder on blue again. So yeah, it's a pretty, I guess, cohesive plan around what's happening here and what you're bringing out depending on the matchup. So you do need to be careful of like ratios. You've got to keep that sort of golden rule of those 12 not attack actions, as Brendan's calling them. So you do need to be focused on that if you're going to bring in some of these defense reactions. What actually has to make way is, like potentially an Art of War, a couple of Razor Reflex, a couple of Ancestral, is how it ends up being.
Awesome. So I do see that you have a Null Gloves in the sideboard. So when are you playing that specifically? Because I know there's a bit of a toss-up whether you play it in a chain or not. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, so not playing into chain. Breaking Scales comes in. It's super important because of breakpoints. The Breaking Scales actually makes the life for chain so hard. Sometimes because of their hand, if they don't want to block because they're setting up like an Art of War turn or their own Plunder Run or something, they're actively like throwing equipment. And if you have this breakpoint, it's just super crucial, especially paired with some of your other buffs like Art of War, like Ancestral Empowerment. So really key. What the Null Glove is actually for is purely against Viscera. So if you're not expecting any Viscera, you can cut the Null Gloves. You can actually also play it against Kano, and you only ever actually use it when they do like double spell turns, so like a Sonic Boom turn, or like Chain Lightning into Snapback, whatever it might be. But I would actually say, and I did just want to talk about a few cards that can be options maybe for the Unmovables or even the Command and Conquers or Remembrance if you're not expecting control decks, is you could actually play Prayer. So you could play Erin's Prayer if you are expecting to face Kano.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, I was about to ask you what changes you might make, if any. But yeah, really interesting that you do kind of stay to the 60 and stay to your core. I also agree that I think Aggro Katsu is an extremely powerful deck right now, and a deck that can kind of impose its will in any matchup, which is not something I feel like a lot of decks can say right now. Like you said, trying to do 2 things. A lot of decks that kind of end up doing both, kind of mediocre, where it seems like the decks that are sticking to a very core game plan are tending to perform better. But I totally agree with you. I think Aggro Katsu is probably one of the best decks in the format, and the thing I least want to see when I sit across from someone at the table. But yeah, really good deck, and if you're looking for something it's I don't know, it's fun, right? You can do a lot of damage, but it's also extremely technical, and I think you can improve a lot throughout your gameplay. Aggro Katsu is a really, really good pick. But as we go to close here, Hayden, is there anything else you want to say about the deck?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like it's a great deck to, I think, pick up and play because it has a really, really proactive plan. But there's also ways that you can really tune and sort of hone your craft on the deck, to be honest. There's a lot of lines that aren't super intuitive to start with. There's a lot of things like you're trying to set up and craft like the best 5-card hands through mid games, and there's a lot of trade off with that, especially on like your first 2 turns about how you pitch and defend, and maybe even on some turns you throttle back on 1 to 2 damage in order to have the right card in your arsenal for next turn. So there is all these sort of decisions. The one thing I do like about those, like the sideboarding is super straightforward with those sort of like modular pieces we talked about with the generic non-attack, with the generic attack actions, the ninja combo starters, the combo cards, the non-attack actions, or the not attack actions as we call them, and the resources. So yeah, and then I guess in terms of like if you were looking for maybe a different option that's been pretty popular, we do also have like the minimalism belittle like line as well, which has been pretty popular. The reason we don't actually play it here, one of the things I find really awkward in the aggressive decks is you actually don't have enough 3 or lower attacks to reveal to belittle. Generally those will be blues, and if you're revealing a blue to belittle and then going and finding another blue, it's not actually that powerful. What you really want is like to tunic this and then go and find like a red card, maybe have the blue, or sometimes, then you've got the minimalism to start going off. When you're having to like reveal, a blue one with Gust Wave or something, that's when the deck can sort of throttle back on power. So we don't play it in this version, but I think the mid-range versions can utilize this card to a bit more effect. But yeah, overall, I think it could be a great choice for this weekend. If you are, as Brendan says, looking for more notes on the sideboard guide, matchup plans, then yeah, you can go find those.
Yep. Awesome. Well, I hope you guys like the deck, and I hope to not see too much of it at Vegas. Just kidding. It's a fantastic deck if you're looking, like we talked about, if you're looking for something technical, something you can improve on, something very fun and extremely competitive in this current meta. Katsu Aggro is a great pick. So with that, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks, guys. Bye.